लड़का मेरा समझता नहीं थोड़ा भी, इधर किधर भाग जाता है। 3 बार बाहर निकल के गई लेकिन इसको पाई नहीं मैं अभी। 10 दिन का दिन होता है, मेरा बड़ा बड़ा लड़के मेरे कभी नहीं जाते हैं, लेकिन यही आरामी है।
She doesn't like that he roams around the whole day. Very
बाहर
young.
निकलेगा तो एरिया कैसा है, एरिया अच्छा नहीं है, नहीं है। ये मेरा न आस गिर रहा है, ऐसे शहर के थोड़ा गिरता है फालतू में। जोन बीमारी है अभी, मेरा किडनी खराब बीमारी है। अभी मैं खराब बीमार मर जाए कि कौन देखेगा तुमको दवा? अभी मेरा दवा के लिए मैं एक दिन नहीं चलती है, और मेरा आदमी एक क्षण मेरा विश्वास का नहीं है।
होता है मगर रहना पड़ता है हमको भी। सरकार को अपना रहना पड़ता है, काम चोरी करते हैं।
अगर सरकार करना चाहे तो करेंगे ना,
कर सकते हैं मगर
हम पीपल्स कितना करेंगे? मतलब
एक्चुअली रीजन में हम लोग की गलती है। हम लोग को वहाँ कचरा उधर डस्टबिन फेंकना चाहिए, बट हम लोग यहाँ पे फेंक देते हैं। यहाँ पे इजी है ना।
स्वच्छ भारत अभियान का तो कुछ मोटिव नहीं रहा, क्योंकि कोई वो सिंसियरिटी से कोई काम नहीं करता है। अगर हम सही रहेंगे ना तो गवर्नमेंट उस पर थोड़ा वर्क करेगी, ये भी हो सकता है।
Water access drives from the public standpipes stationed throughout the slum. Additionally, with the limited lavatories they have, they are extremely filthy and broken down to the point of being unsafe. Mahim Creek is a local river that is widely used by the local residents for urination and defecation, causing a spread of contagious diseases. The open sewers in the city drain to the creek, causing a spike in the water pollutants, septic conditions, and foul odors. Due to the air pollutants, diseases such as lung cancer, tuberculosis, and asthma are the common among residents. There are government proposals in regarding to improving the Dharvi's sanitation issues. The residents have a section where they wash their clothes in water that people defecate in. This spread the amount of disease as doctors have to deal with over 4,000 cases of typhoid a day. There is also an average of 1 toilet per 500 people. Such extreme cases of poverty in the Dharvi has always been a major concern for the developing countries like India. Economists have provided various reasons for such poverty, which can be the uncontrolled population, colonial destruction of economy, slow growth models, geographical factors, the anti-poverty schemes, gender discrimination, the lack of education and skills, and many others. Attempts have been made in all societies to define the poverty, but all of them are conditioned by the vision of the minimum or a good life obtained in the society. For instance, the concept of poverty in the USA would be significantly different from India, because the average person is able to afford much higher level of living in the US. For instance, in India, the generally accepted definition of poverty emphasizes minimum level of living rather than a reasonable level of living. This attitude is born out of a realization that it would not be possible to provide even a minimum quantum of basic needs for some decades, and therefore, to talk about a reasonable level of living or good life may appear to be a wishful thinking at the present stage. Thus, in India, the absolute standard of poverty is expressed in terms of minimum requirement of cereals, pulses, milk, vegetable, butter, or calorie intake is conditioned by the relative levels of the living prevalent in the country. The deprivation of a significant section of a society of minimum basic needs in the face of a luxurious life for the elite classes makes poverty more glaring. Whereas the relative poverty in India is studied where the income distribution of the top 5 to 10% is compared with the bottom 5 to 10% of the population. Even in the affluent societies, such pockets of poverty exist. But for the underdeveloped countries, it is the existence of the mass poverty that is a cause of concern. Several economists and organizations have conducted studies on the extent of poverty in India. Some of them, like the Ojha's estimate of poverty, Dandekar and the Rath study of poverty in India, Minha's study of rural poor, Bardhan's study of rural poor, Montek Ahluwalia's study of the rural poverty 1977, Planning Commission Expert Group Report 1993, and many others. If we look from the high level about these various reports, the V.S. Minhas has indicated that the percentage of the rural poor has declined during the period of 1956 to 1967. On the other hand, the Ojha and the Pranab Bardhan indicated that the increasing proportion of the rural poor has been witnessed. In their view, the direction of the change indicates a trend of growing pauperization. Whereas Montek Singh Ahluwalia believes that the Indian experience over the past 2 decades does not indicate the trend increase in the poverty. In general, a pattern of fluctuation is seen with the incidence of the rural poverty falling in the period of a good agricultural performance and rising in the period of the poor performance. Economists may have the differences in methodology, and thus their estimates may vary in magnitude. But there is general consensus on 2 things. First, the percentage of population below the poverty line has started declining as a consequence of the indirect benefit of higher growth rate and also as a result of the impact of the direct programs of poverty elevation. Still, the proportion of the population below the poverty line is about 37% as per the 7th plan, which can be considered to be too high. Secondly, the absolute number of the poor has certainly increased over the years. The principal elements of the situation are: the major chunk of the poor reside in the rural areas. Among them, 2 principal categories: the small farmers and the landless laborers. A little less than half of the rural poor are landless laborers, and a little more than that are small and the marginal farmers. The 2 categories overlap since small farmers also work as agricultural laborers. Second, the major economic problem of the weaker sections in the rural India is not open unemployment but low productivity employment. Moreover, in the urban areas, the problem of the poverty is an overflow of rural poverty. Most of the poor are either self-employed or are working in the non-organized manufacturing or service sectors of the economy. The question that is relevant here is of the low-paid job in case of the wage employment or low resource base in case of the self-employed. Economists can conduct an unending debate on the correctness of one estimate over the other, but judged by any reasonable standards, the extent of abject poverty in rural India is alarmingly massive. The precise estimate whether it is 2/5 or 1/2 of the rural people who are beset with crushing poverty today is a terribly academic matter. A far more important and the practical need today is to focus policy analysis on concrete measures for the benefit of the poor, particularly in the rural poor, who are the more numerous but fail to catch as much attention as the urban poor. The World Bank report has calculated the incidence of poverty among the different categories of the rural households. It was revealed that the person in the wage-dependent families, including those working in the non-agricultural jobs, comprises 46% of the poor in rural areas. For agricultural laborers households, 64% were below poverty line. Self-employed households constituted the other large block of the rural poor. Nearly 38% of the total poor were accounted for by the self-employed households. 2 factors account for this high incidence of the poverty among the rural labor households. Firstly, there is a considerable degree of unemployment and underemployment among rural laborers. It has been established that the incidence of unemployment is the highest among casual laborers. Even during the periods of employment, their weak bargaining power results in the low wages being paid to them. The market forces are so strong that the minimum wage legislation is observed more in breach than in compliance. Another major cause of the rural poverty is the low asset base of the poor. As per the report of the RBI, 27% of the rural households owns an asset worth less than 20,000 rupees. And 23.8% of the households owns an asset ranging from 20 to 50,000 rupees. In other words, nearly 51% of the households owned only 10% of the assets. The situation becomes more grim when we see that the 14% of the top households owns asset worth equivalent to the 66% from the bottom. It is really distressing that the urban areas, which are considered to be the forerunners of development, indicate such sharp inequality in asset distribution. It is quite probable that on account of lack of employment opportunities, the rural poor are shifting to the urban areas in search of livelihood and thus swelling the rank of the poor assetless households. It may be mentioned that the large proportion of the rural poor remain in poverty not only because they have a very few assets, but also because most of these assets are in the form of the durable consumer goods rather than such assets as land, farm implements, livestock, which increases their productive capacity. Another major cause of the poverty is increase in the poverty ratio. Himachal Pradesh, Haryana, Bihar are among the major states in this group. However, the entire northeastern region, with the exception of Mizoram, Manipur, Meghalaya, Sikkim, Nagaland, Assam, Tripura, and Arunachal Pradesh, experienced increase in the poverty ranging from 0.6 to 0.9% per annum. Obviously, these underlines the need for promoting growth of the northeastern regions if insurgency and the terrorism have to be seriously controlled. States which have shown better record of the poverty reductions are West Bengal, Gujarat, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Odisha. Though some of these exhibit high proportion of population below poverty, more than 40%. A very disturbing feature of the poverty scenario is that 7 major states, that is Maharashtra, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Bihar, and Odisha. High concentration of extreme poor people can be witnessed in these states. In the 8th five-year plan, when the Rao Manmohan model of the growth was first time laid forward as an indicative plan, the essence of the new industrial policies of the 1991 was laid forward, which is most commonly